Welcome back, everyone. So I was asked if I would do a video on the last meal of a condemned prisoner. And since the last one that I did, and I will try to put either card here up at the top or put a link down in the description to the other videos that I've done on this. But I was asked if I would do an update on the last meal for a condemned prisoner. Now, we need to first start off with not every state in the United States has the death penalty. Most have a moratorium on, inmate executions at the state level. We have just now, as of the last year, 2020, started the federal execution system back up, and there's a lot of legal maneuvering and questions about, does the federal government have the right to execute an actual inmate? Does the state have a lot? Do they have the right to actually, carry out an eye for an eye, execution? So, I don't care where you are on either side. I mean, I know there's people out there who are in favor of the death penalty, and I know there's people who oppose the death penalty. And I think it's myself personally, my personal view is I think it depends upon the individual themselves, and the case and what they actually, did that justifies if there should be a death penalty, carried out in it or not. But we're not talking about that today. Today, we're taking a look at, what do they get? What can they have as their last meal at the state level and at the federal level? And on top of that, is there a budget request, like limitation? When did they get their last meal? Is it given just before they walk into the death chamber, and so their stomachs are full? Or do they give it to them at some other point through the day, leading up to their actual execution? So we're going to jump into it all. And thank you for joining me today. As we know, throughout history of the death penalty, here in America, a lot of inmates have gotten to the point where they know they're going to be executed. They're out of appeals. They have a date that is set for their actual execution, and they have severely abused the actual right to have and request a final meal for themselves. And so much so that two states have actually done away with a last meal as a choice completely. And those two states are New Jersey and Texas. You don't get a last meal there request. You get whatever the hell we're going to give you. Now, we all know that New Jersey isn't, currently, carrying out executions, but Texas, you don't mess with Texas. In Texas, if they could get away with putting people on bleachers and electrocuting 20 or 30 inmates at a time in Texas, they would do it. Now, I'm not making fun of Texas. I'm just saying, when it comes to an execution and carrying out the final sentence of an inmate, Texas ain't messing around. So don't mess with Texas. If you're going to commit a crime, go somewhere else. Don't do it in Texas. And by the way, don't do it in Oklahoma or Nebraska either, because they ain't messing around either, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, but Texas has done away with, final meal. You get what everybody else is getting in the prison system that day. You don't get anything special. You don't get an extra milk. You don't even get an extra cookie. We don't care in Texas, is what the message that they are sending to their inmates. We're not going to coddle you for the last 10 minutes of your life. We're going to give you exactly what you got coming to you, and that's it. New Jersey has the same exact policy as Texas, but they're not carrying out the death penalty. A lot of states have a moratorium on the death penalty. And it's not necessarily just a political, issue why they have a moratorium. It's a legal issue. It's also a moral issue, and it's also well, they can't get the actual drugs to carry out, death by lethal injection. So they're just not carrying it out. The drug in question is sodium pentothal, and states just can't get it. It's very limited because the manufacturer never meant sodium pentothal to be used as a drug that was given to an inmate to carry out an execution. And they have a large moral, dilemma on their hands where they're like, we're making a lot of money on this drug. Our stockholders are getting a lot of money on this drug by selling this drug. But do we really want to be known as the company that is, helping states execute other people? So there has been a very limited supply of it. So states have put a moratorium into effect until they can actually get the drug in some states. Other states have, the governors of the states have always been against the death penalty. So they just put a moratorium in place on the death penalty. So inmates will still go through their processes of appeals and legal maneuvering. And then once they're out of appeals, they'll just sit on death row and waste away. So back to last meals of the condemned. 16 states in the United States, even if they have a moratorium or not, but I'm going to look at all the states, but 16 states have a cap of $20. That is the maximum that they're willing to spend on the last meal for a condemned prisoner. 16 states. Now, of those 16 states, you can request a meal be made for you, but the $20 budget for it must be used within the actual supplies that are within the actual penitentiary, or something that can be gathered locally within the community around. And most inmates who are on this is their last meal in those 16 states request things like cheeseburgers, French fries, or a local mom and pop place make meatloaf or a pizza. Those are the common things that most inmates who are condemned to die request. Or fried chicken. Fried chicken is a very popular one as well. 5 states have no limit budget-wise on what they actually limit the inmate to be able to spend. If the inmate wants to spend $100 on filet mignon and a baked potato, and it can be sourced locally from a local establishment, then that's what they get as their last meal. 2 states have no final meal at all. You don't get any special requests. You get a final meal, but you get what they call a general affair meal. No, you don't get a kosher meal. You don't get a meal that is meant for someone who is in the infirmary. You don't get a meal that is for anybody else of because of religious reasons. A kosher meal or anything else. You get general fare. You get exactly what the large majority of the population of the prison is getting. If it happens to be a bean tray that day, where you get 3 bean salad, refried beans, and tortillas, and that's it, that's your last meal. And those 2 states are Texas and New Jersey. That's all they give you, is exactly what is on the general affair menu for that day. Now, again, not every state is carrying out the death penalty in the United States, but we all know Texas is. No. All right, now let's look at the federal prison system and the meals for the condemned prisoners in the federal prison. We had a moratorium on federal executions up until 2020. Comes to a last meal. A last meal must be done within reason, is what they call it. And there's not necessarily a budget, but it is within reason. And the most popular meal in the federal prison for a condemned prisoner's last meal is fried chicken and mashed potatoes, basically a KFC meal with biscuits, but it can come from anywhere. It can come from Popeyes for all I know. It doesn't matter. Whatever they have locally, that is easily, they have the resources to get it. So that is their meal. They don't have a budget maximum or minimum on it. I guess in a way, I mean, we're all paying for it either way. So when it comes to the when do prisoners receive their final meal? Do they receive it half hour before they are executed, an hour, a day, a week? When do they actually get their final meal? And you'd be surprised to know that there is no actual rules for when they get their last meal. In most states, they get their last meal when the rest of the inmates are being served their meal that night. So if dinner is at 6 o'clock, you get your final meal, before you're condemned to, before you'll be executed at 6 o'clock. And the federal prison system, they can get their actual last meal the day before, and then they will have, breakfast and lunch, and then they're condemned. But they try to do, when it comes to death sentences themselves, it has a date. It does not have a time on the actual death, like you will die on the 24th at 3:13. They don't have a time on it. It's the 24th. And most states follow the rules that, okay, if you're condemned to die, we will put you to death at midnight before the change to the 25th. So they will give them their meal. They will, then walk them from the waiting chamber, death chamber, to the actual room where they will execute them themselves. And trust me, before anybody puts in the comment section that I called the actual cell that they are housed in before they actually executed, I called it the death chamber. I want to point out that 22 states called the final cell and the room, everything, the death chamber. And they call it all one name. They don't call it, well, this is the holding cell for the condemned, and this is the actual room that we kill them in. No, they call the whole thing one thing. They go from death row, which is a housing unit. They go from death row to the chamber itself, where there's usually one or two cells that are side by side that are waiting rooms, basically, for those who are about to be executed. So on you. I know what it's called. I looked it up. I researched this stuff. So anyways, back to when do they get their meals? Most states, try to do it just before. So if they do it, if their meal time is at 6 o'clock, they get their final meal at 6 o'clock. They don't get, a snack or anything later on. They have 6 hours to eat their stupid meal. If they, but there are 4 states who place the final meal at no more than 3 hours before they execute them. So they will get their meal, at 8, 9 o'clock, somewhere in there. And then they can eat their meal, and then they are executed. So that is taking a look at the actual meals. Now, what are some of the extraordinary meals that some inmates have gone lengths to? And why does Texas and New Jersey limit the, not have any final meal at all? Texas stopped the death penalty after one inmate decided that he was going to carry this perk, if you want, out just a little bit farther. He ordered 6 Domino's pizzas, a half a rack of baby back ribs. He ordered 6 cheeseburgers, 3 milkshakes, 4 sodas, coffee, water, juice, and that wasn't it. Then he ordered whole pies, not a slice of a pie, all whole pie, whole pecan pie. He ordered an entire apple pie, and the state of Texas said, "What the heck?" And they said, "That's it." So they started the motion after that to stop inmates from having such an enormous meal before they were executed. But before they could actually put it into effect, every inmate after that, did outlandish requests. One wanted, a steak, cooked particularly the right way. Ordered the largest porterhouse steak he could think of, and it was huge. I've seen pictures of it. But he ordered porterhouse. He ordered, 3 baked potatoes and like 6 different sides on top of the baked potato. So they said, no, that's it. We're done. And then they changed the law, and now they get nothing. And basically the same thing happened in New Jersey, but it happened with an inmate who ordered an enormous seafood platter, of shellfish, fish, crab legs, lobster as his final meal. And they said, nope, that's it. Not doing it anymore. You've ruined it for everybody after you. So the state of Texas and New Jersey, that's why they stopped. But back to the final meals for for the federal system. The federal government system has not always had a final meal request in place. For most states, for the federal government system, wherever they may be housed, Leavenworth Penitentiary in particular, Leavenworth didn't have a last meal request in place for close to 60 years. They had no final meal at all. If you were condemned to die on the 24th of March, the 24th, they would just stop feeding you. That way, but they were hanging people back then, or your electric chair. And so, regardless of the method of execution, it had nothing to do with why they stopped. They just decided it was cheaper to not feed you, wasting food on you, because we're going to kill you here shortly. So that's a look at federal and state penitentiary systems. Besides, for the condemned, they are limited on what they can get, when they can get it, and budget wise, and restraints on availability. If it can be sourced locally, they're not going to fly to New York and get you a piece of homemade cheesecake from someplace there and fly it all the way back to Oregon for you, Christian Longo. They're not going to do it. If you can't get a cheesecake from Safeway, down the street, you're not getting it. I'm sorry. Well, thank you for joining me today. I hope everyone enjoys this. And again, I'll try to link at the top or in the description the video that I've done on this before. And everyone have a wonderful weekend.
Well, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you'd give this a thumbs up, and let YouTube and the algorithm know that you enjoyed this content. If you have only watched one video and this is it, well, thank you for stopping by. But I have a whole channel of over 500 videos for on YouTube right now. Why don't you go check one out? Links down below. There's a next suggested video there. You can subscribe too. I wouldn't mind if you would do that.